To start, an anecdote from Thomas Causalus, longtime professor and researcher of the intersection between Zen and Western philosophy. For some background, Causalus was on a trip to Japan learning about Zen from the source. Facing him, the monk said, "You have my permission to practice Zen meditation in this temple, but tell me this, what is Zen?" After some hesitation and embarrassed smiling, I said something about Zen's being a way of life rather than a set of dogmas. Laughter filled the tatami-matted reception room. "Everyone comes here to study Zen, but none of them knows what Zen is," said the monk. "Zen is knowing thyself. You are a Western philosopher, and you know of Socrates' quest. Did you assume Zen would be something different?" Hello, my name is Cameron Chertavian. This podcast is titled Socrates and Zen, How to Live an Examined Life. It was created for Classics 2101, Socrates and the Problem of History. I was personally introduced to Buddhist thought through meditation. Shown the practice by a friend, I began to incorporate it into my daily life, finding it rewarding and meaningful. This led me to read texts on meditation, many of which incorporate elements of all types of Buddhism. While I'm not an especially religious person, Buddhist philosophy, the Buddhist understanding of reality, and the stories of its great masters all resonated strongly with me. As we went through our course, little elements in our Socratic texts stuck out to me, signposts that seemed to link two very different philosophies of life. This podcast is an effort to excavate those connections further. I decided to focus on the Buddhist sect of Zen, since it's the one whose philosophy I know best. Using various Zen sources, I will do a close reading of Plato's Phaedrus, hoping to shed light on those crossovers beyond the offhanded note in the margin of my reading. I think that inquiry like this is not just interesting, but important. Zen provides a unique perspective through which to view the world, one which confounds and contradicts Western thought. Oftentimes, the two seem irreconcilable. To connect these two could point to a shared philosophy of living that spans across cultures and generations, which seems pretty important to me. Before beginning my comparison, I wanted to address the sources I use and the problems that they create for my project. Oftentimes, examinations of classical texts involve dealing with unreliable narrators, historical murkiness, translation issues, and even fragmented segments of writing. While Zen doesn't deal with these exact problems, it has its own set that complicates its primary sources. Zen has been described as a special teaching without scriptures, beyond words and letters. One no drama, a short Zen tale embodying elements of the practice, illustrates this well. As Zen master Munan prepares to die, he names his student Shoju as his successor. Munan gifts Shoju a valuable book, passed down from master to master over 7 generations and filled with their knowledge. Shoju initially rejects the book, saying that he learned Zen without writing and is satisfied as such. But Munan insists, and the second Shoju feels the book touch his hands, he thrusts it into a nearby fire. This may seem like an extreme reaction to most, but it illustrates the Zen aversion to written text and recordings of any kind. True Zen is said to be transmitted heart to heart, and anything else is inferior, improper even. This means that Zen is a scriptureless practice with elements existing in fragments, only compiled at a later date. I primarily used one collection of Zen riddles, no dramas, and other tales called Zen Flesh, Zen Bones, compiled in the 1930s by an American Zen researcher who spent most of his life in India and Japan. While the book is considered an unofficial Zen scripture of sorts, I have no way of verifying the stories inside and have to place my trust in the author and the research I did on him. Other sources I consulted were similar books of Zen riddles and stories, modern analysis of Zen philosophy, and translated autobiographies of Zen masters. My use of Plato's Phaedrus poses problems as well. Chief among these is the fact that Phaedrus was written by Plato. As we have seen in class, Plato has the tendency to use Socrates as a mouthpiece, spreading his own views through his teacher. Socrates' refusal to write down his work is actually an important link to Zen, as I'll illustrate later, but it creates an unreliable screen through which to view his philosophy. As with all works of Socrates, he is interpreted through others. Another issue lies in my analysis of only Phaedrus. Plato's Apology, Euthyphro, Gorgias, or Xenophon's Memorabilia would have all been good points of comparison, but the length and scope of this project led me to choose a close reading of one text, despite how that limits my analysis. With that said, I'm going to dive into Phaedrus with a Zen lens, hopefully returning with a little more knowledge on both topics. First, I would like to share a bit of background on Phaedrus. The dialogue takes place between Socrates and his young friend Phaedrus, a passionate admirer of rhetoric. As they walk into the countryside along the river Ilissos, they discuss topics of rhetoric, metaphysics, and erotic love at length. This dialogue is unique in its setting. Often, Plato's conversations take place in larger company, and none happen in such an idyllic retreat as this. I will divide my comparison of Socrates and Zen into 3 sections, asking 3 questions of increasing depth. The first of these is, what are both Zen thinkers and Socrates doing? What do they appear to value? This covers the surface-level qualities that first drew my attention to similarities between the two. Socrates had been known to forsake a lavish lifestyle, valuing modesty and contemplation. This is referenced in Phaedrus. As they begin their long walk along the wet banks of the river, Phaedrus remarks how lucky it is to be barefoot that day, adding offhandedly that Socrates never has shoes. Socrates' lack of shoes has become a symbol of the simple life he leads, and how little he values material goods. At the end of the dialogue, line 279c, Socrates recites a short prayer which further illuminates his values. O dear Pan and all other gods of this place, grant that I may be beautiful inside. Let all my external possessions be in friendly harmony with what is within. May I consider the wise man rich. As for gold, let me have as much as a moderate man could bear and carry with him. Socrates speaks highly of internal improvement, moderacy, humbleness, and sensibility. He does not wish for the excess of a rich man, instead hoping to recognize the wise man as rich. This shares a lot in common with Zen followers, who often live as beggars, forsaking materialism to pursue the spiritual path. One piece of advice left by Chinese master Zengetsu said that poverty is your treasure. Never exchange it for an easy life, adding that modesty is the foundation of all virtues. Master Muman often said that treasures of the house do not come in by the front door. These sentiments flip the script on what we value. Instead of material gains, internal improvement and understanding is the most precious thing a human can cultivate, and a focus on materiality is often detrimental. While Socrates' view may not be as extreme, there are certainly parallels between his humble existence and that of a Zen layman. While not mentioned in this dialogue, Socrates' tendency to frequent the agora, the Athenian marketplace, and engage market-goers on all philosophical matters was another similarity to the actions of Zen practitioners. There are sequential woodblock carvings of 10 bulls, created in the 1100s by a Chinese Zen master, that have been valued by students of Zen through the centuries. They depict the path of enlightenment, the realization of emptiness that is at the core of Zen reality. The first 9 drawings show the harnessing of the bull, representing the human ego, and the eventual dissolving of the ego. The 10th carving, though, shows the enlightened Zen student returning to the world to guide others. The inscription below the carving reads, "Barefoot and naked of breast, I mingle with the people of the world. My clothes are ragged and dust-laden, and I am ever blissful. I go to the marketplace with my wine bottle and return home with my staff. I visit the wine shop and the market, and everyone I look upon becomes enlightened." Aside from the noteworthy reference to a lack of shoes, this description depicts the Zen master not as one who holds himself above the common people, but someone who returns to the world enlightened to help others realize their true nature. Whether this is through dialogue, as with Socrates, or some other form of persuasion, we do not know, but the similarities to Socrates in the Agora are striking. Finally, Zen and Socratic thought both seem to share the ultimate goal of knowing oneself fully. Early in the dialogue, Socrates shows his disinterest in interpreting mythology, stating in line 230a that, "I have no time for such things. I am still unable, as the Delphic inscription ordered, to know myself, and it really seems to me ridiculous to look onto other things before I have understood that." Here, Socrates states his goal, to understand himself more thoroughly and completely. Similarly, Zen is described as seeing directly into one's nature, as a pursuit of truth about oneself, which can also lead to knowledge of the world. While Socrates and Zen masters seem to act similarly and share some of the same values, they go about perceiving their true nature in at once contradictory and similar ways, which is something I will address in my next section. For this next part, I'm asking, if knowing thyself is the ultimate goal, how do both Socrates and Zen students go about achieving this? Here lies the true tension between the Socratic and Zen pursuits. The former uses dialogue and philosophy to uncover true nature, while the latter considers these things inadequate, at most aids to silent contemplation. Zen is even known to have a sort of phobia to traditional philosophy. In one No drama, 4 traveling monks argue about subjectivity and objectivity. They discuss the perception of a nearby boulder, with one monk stating that, from the Buddhist viewpoint, everything is an objectification of the mind, so the stone is inside my mind. At this point, Zen Master Hojin steps in, commenting winkingly, "Your head must feel very heavy if you are carrying around a stone like that in your mind." This comment, while comical, gets at the Zen opinion on aligning too closely with philosophy. While the monk's comment may not be wrong, it cannot help him realize his Zen nature. An intellectual knowledge of such things cannot substitute for a true understanding of reality. This can only be understood in silent contemplation. This devotion, the silent contemplation, is echoed through Zen literature. At the Tofuku Temple, Master Soichi was known to teach in total silence, even abolishing the reciting of sutras, leaving his pupils to do nothing but meditate. Another No drama shows this perfectly. Jiyun, a Sanskrit scholar and Zen student, was well known for delivering lectures to his brother students. His mother, who, even in ancient Zen stories, always knows best, hears of this and writes him a letter. "Son, I do not think you became a devotee of the Buddha because you desired to turn into a walking dictionary for others. There is no end to information and commentation, glory and honor. I wish you would stop this lecture business. Shut yourself up in a little temple in a remote part of the mountain. Devote your time to meditation and in this way attain true realization." Obviously, this idea that silent contemplation is key conflicts with the Socratic method of Elenchus. In Phaedrus, line 70b, Socrates states that if medicine is our way of determining the nature of the body, rhetoric is used to determine the nature of the soul, necessitating rhetoric in the process of knowing one's true nature. He gives a speech on erotic love in order to show Phaedrus, a true lover of rhetoric, that sound rhetoric follows sound philosophical ideas. There is no mention of silent contemplation. For Socrates, the contemplation is achieved through dialogue with others, something he does frequently. That being said, we can see parallels between the Zen and Socratic view of their respective ways of self-discovery. Socrates famously never wrote anything down, with only pupils like Plato recording his speeches. He seemed to believe that dialogue is the only way to determine the nature of the soul, and nothing else will properly suffice. He and Phaedrus discuss the merit of written philosophy and describe their ideal understanding at line 278a. Take a man who thinks that written discourse on any subject can only be a great amusement, that no discourse worth serious attention has ever been written in verse or prose, that those that are recited in public without questioning and explanation are only given in order to produce a conviction. He believes that at their very best, these can only serve as a reminder to those who already know. Such a man, Phaedrus, would not be just what you and I both pray to come. While they have different approaches to realizing their true nature, Socrates and Zen thinkers share a conviction that their method of realization cannot be reduced or substituted. Zen nature can only be realized through contemplation and silence. Words can reference and point towards our true nature, but through words alone, this nature can't be realized. This sounds strikingly similar to Socrates' belief that written word would, at best, serve as a reminder to those who already know. As I quoted earlier, Zen is said to be shared heart to heart. I think that Socrates would believe something similar as well. While one prizes dialogue and the other silence, both recognize some dynamism and fundamental aliveness that is inherent to their mode of inquiry. This quality of aliveness can't be replicated. This tension between silent and verbal contemplation is a difference I cannot square, and I'm not going to try to. There is certainly an element of dialogue in Zen inquiry, and I don't know if Socrates valued a sort of informal meditation, although it wouldn't entirely surprise me. I think it is enough to say that both Zen and Socratic thought value their method of growing wise in a related fashion. These first two sections showed connection between Socrates and Zen, but I think my final question reveals the most compelling link between the two philosophies. In this section, I am asking, what is the thing both Socrates and Zen are searching for? What is Socrates aiming to know in knowing himself? In Zen terms, what is the mind essence of man that so many seek through silent contemplation? A good portion of Phaedrus is devoted to the metaphysics of Greek philosophy, an explanation of the process of reincarnation. Socrates explains the path of the immortal soul, which, after briefly glimpsing some great view on the precipice of heaven, fall to earth to begin the 10,000-year cycle of reincarnation. The amount of this great view they have seen determines their lot on earth. Those who have seen the most become philosophers, followed by kings, statesmen, all the way down to sophists and tyrants, who have seen the least of this great view. What is this great view beyond heaven, you may ask? To a Western mind, Socrates' description at line 247c is strange to say the least. The place beyond heaven. None of our earthly poets has ever sung or will ever sing its praises enough. What is in this place is without color and without shape and without solidity, a being that really is what it is, the subject of all true knowledge, visible only to intelligence, the soul's steersman. On the way around, it has a view of justice as it is. It has a view of self-control. It has a view of knowledge, not the knowledge that is close to change, that becomes different as it knows the different things which we consider real down here. No, it is the knowledge of what really is. Formless, shapeless, the subject of all true knowledge. Socrates, the speaker of truth himself, admits the difficulty in describing it. You may be asking yourself, what is this place? To clarify, this is not heaven, which is a sort of divine palace the gods occupy, but something beyond and above that, referred to by Plato as reality with a capital R. To an Eastern mind, this place may sound surprisingly familiar. It's a spot-on description of Zen emptiness, also known as nirvana. Nirvana, or enlightenment, is the ultimate goal of Zen contemplation. It's notoriously hard to describe, a formless state of nothingness from which all life springs. Similarly to Socrates' description in Phaedrus, nirvana does not concern itself with earthly knowledge, the knowledge of changing, impermanent things. For Zen practitioners, it is a realization of the true nature of life, and with it comes wisdom, judiciousness, and the dissolution of the ego. In response to Socrates' gripe that earthly poets do not sing enough of this, I would love to show him some Japanese Zen poetry, as this place above heaven is a huge focus of theirs. As I mentioned in section 2, Zen nirvana cannot be described correctly through words, and so I will do a decidedly poor job of that here. Two examples from Zen literature help strengthen this comparison. The first of these is the example of the Mu koan. A koan is a special type of riddle that Zen masters devise for their students to break through their logic. Nirvana is not realized through discursive thought, and therefore thinking about a koan is a non-starter. One must embody it, focus their energy into it, in Zen terms. The term mu is literally the symbol for no thing with a hyphen, or nay. In the descriptions I read, it was said to be not nothing, not something, but beyond this duality of something and nothing. This sounds familiar to the formless realm that Socrates describes, a sort of pure version of reality that can't be put into words. The second example lies in the woodblock carvings of bulls I mentioned earlier, which represent the path to enlightenment. The eighth carving is titled Both Bull and Self Transcended. The inscription below the carving reads, "Whip, rope, person, and bull all merge into no thing. This heaven is so vast that no message can stain it. How may a snowflake exist in a raging fire? Here are the footprints of patriarchs." As with Socrates, these carvings attempt to describe the indescribable. This vast heaven is incomprehensible, beyond words, yet it still exists. The rhetorical question posed about the snowflake in the fire hints at this as well. This state of being is impossible, but it is here. In Phaedrus, Socrates makes the important point that if one chooses the life of a philosopher, who, we must remember, has seen this shapeless place beyond heaven 3 times in a row, they are able to return to heaven and become angels in only 3,000 years, as opposed to 10,000. So that's a little confusing to understand, but what does it tell us? Unlike Zen practitioners, Socrates did not believe in divine realization in this lifetime. He did not believe in any kind of enlightenment. Instead, he believed that the path of philosophy allowed one to see true reality, or Zen nirvana, more frequently during reincarnation, and return to the state of an angel more quickly. By choosing philosophy in his cycle of reincarnation, or his life, Socrates was bringing himself closer to the divine and his eventual return to heaven. Zen philosophy doesn't believe in a literal heaven, but this realization of nothingness and unity with the divine is the entire goal of Zen practice. To me, it seems that Socrates and Zen practitioners are taking different paths towards the same ultimate goal. In this podcast, I have highlighted some links between Socratic and Zen philosophy in the areas of outward appearance and belief, methods of contemplation, and metaphysical understanding. By doing this, I hope to in some way reconcile these opposite ways of thinking, and suggest that it's possible to have a shared belief system across cultures and generations. The question of a historical link between Socrates and Zen is one that has attracted some attention, although not a lot. In my limited research, I was not able to find any journal articles on the subject, only some historical blog posts and books that gesture to a link between early Indian influence and Greek thought. I do not have much knowledge on the subject, but it certainly doesn't seem impossible that there could be a link. Buddha was born in the 5th century BC during the Greek reign, but in my research I came across a 4,000-year-old Sanskrit text considered to be the earliest precursor to modern Buddhism. That's to say that this style of contemplation predated both the Greeks and Buddha, and could have reached the Greeks in some form. Another answer to the similarities in Socratic and Zen philosophy is that both get at a fundamental way to perceive reality and understand one's place in it. Gudo Nishijima, a 20th century Zen teacher, said that Buddhism is just humanism. To me, that answer rings most true. It's interesting, comforting even, to think that despite vast social and cultural changes, there is some fundamental aspect of human nature and reality that could hold true and be discovered by anyone.